Da Dang. Chapter 18. Xia Yulu took an awkward seat in the corner with Chu Feng on his side, who was continuously adding food into Xia Yulu's bowl. Have some more. Once you finish eating you can leave early. Xia Yulu was very embarrassed, but it's your father's banquet. Here I am, just indulging in. You're not eating his money anyway. When mentioning his father, Chu Feng didn't show much respect. The money all came from the ministry. He tore off a duck leg for Xia Yulu. Besides, with your meager salary, how can you survive in Nanjing? And he had it right. At home, Xia Yulu only ever had salted fish and pickled vegetables, yet he could enjoy fresh fish and poultry outside. How could he possibly turn down these temptations? As Xia Yulu savored the food discreetly, Minister Chu entered through the gate wearing a grandiose ceremonial robe, smiling as he talked. Judging by his look, he had obviously made meticulous preparations. From his ingratiating attitude, the guest he was welcoming must be someone of high importance. Xia Yulu didn't pay much attention. Only when the people at nearby tables laid down their chopsticks and stood up in unison, did he then peek towards the door. The first thing about the guest that entered his sight was a corner of the purplish golden yesa, followed by a jade belt encrusted with gold and a robe fully embroidered with lion patterns. The guest's gait betrayed his difficulties in walking, and within that one glance, Xia Yulu immediately recognized him to be Liao Jixiang. Among dozens of tables and out of hundreds of men dressed in similar robes, Liao Jixiang could still spot Xia Yulu with just a single glance. After sharing a brief moment of eye contact, they both tacitly averted their gaze. Minister Chu was full of smiles as he led Liao Jixiang to the main seat. Honorable Du Gong, may this humble servant ask for your pity. It is this one's utmost fortune to have you grace us with your presence. This one should have knelt to welcome thee, but 'tis true that this one's ailing legs can bend no more. This one prays for thy mercy, Honorable Du Gong. Xia Yulu was appalled by his flattery. A proper second-rank official, addressing himself as a humble servant? The contrast between his imposing demeanor when they last met and his ingratiating attitude now was simply too striking. Chu Feng clearly didn't expect Liao Jixiang to be the guest that his father had invited. He kept his head down and couldn't bring himself to lift it up again. After taking a few more insipid bites, Xia Yulu nudged Chu Feng's arm. I'm more or less done, so I'll leave first. Chu Feng immediately dropped his chopsticks. I'll go with you. At the head table, Minister Chu saw the two of them the moment he sat down. He spotted Chu Feng first, and incidentally noticed Xia Yulu. As soon as he saw Xia Yulu, his scalp tightened and promptly observed Liao Jixiang's expression. Liao Jixiang didn't show any displeasure. He looked as he always did, cold and aloof and not as approachable as Zhang Xian. So, Minister Chu waved his hand behind his back and some servants immediately approached. A few instructions were soon given to have Xia Yulu removed from the venue. The servant moved inconspicuously by the side of the venue and made way towards Xia Yulu in the corner, leaning down and whispering in his ears. As the two of them were already planning to leave, they immediately stood up. Liao Jixiang, witnessing this at the head table, reacted as if one of his own had been mistreated, or his cherished precious one had been looked down upon. Suddenly, he slammed his palm on the table and instantly posing a dead silence across the entire room. Minister Chu was so frightened that he completely froze with his cup in his hand. Zhang Chai accompanied Liao Jixiang to the banquet today. He came forth, having the long sword ready in his grasp as he studied everyone present. He was about to speak when he spotted Xia Yulu, yet Liao Jixiang spoke first from behind with tender affection, "Since you're already here, do stay." Although it was a subtle remark intended for a friend, everyone else regarded it as a threat. Those pitiful and sympathetic looks shot out and pierced Xia Yulu like needles. Yet surprisingly, he didn't feel any pain at all. All he cared was Liao Jixiang's words of "since you're already here, do stay." It seemed as if those words alone were more than sufficient for him. The sound of clinking wine cups appeared again. Minister Chu, who was most dreadful of awkward silences, eagerly held his cup and raised it with 10 times more enthusiasm than before. Honorable Dugong, this humble servant offers this toast to you. However, Liao Jixiang appeared different from before. His face was cold as always, but now the coldness seemed to be freezing into the bones. He didn't even bother to raise his cup in response. Minister Chu's wrinkled face turned stiff and purple. Unable to maintain his composure, he anxiously said, Honorable Dugong, this one comes with the most sincere and devoted heart. Regarding the troubles among the officials caused by the Yang Society, this one will most definitely. Liao Jixiang truly left him no grace. He didn't even allow time Minister Chu to finish talking before he stood up and left the banquet. Everyone was exchanging looks in confusion except for Xia Yulu, who dropped his chopsticks and dashed outside. He actually didn't know what he could do by following Liao Jixiang out. With a large entourage surrounding Liao Jixiang, he probably wouldn't even be able to see his face. Yet being long enchanted by him, Xia Yulu just couldn't resist. Chu Feng was unaware of Xia Yulu's heart, so he chased after him, but Minister Chu stopped him at the door with a growl. You stop right there. That's no behavior befitting my son. Chu Feng's fist clenched and then let go. He didn't follow Xia Yulu out after all and watched as Xia Yulu walked further away. Liao Jixiang left in a sedan chair. As Xia Yulu didn't dare to openly tail them, he hurried to the other side of the road and walked abreast with the weaving and sewing bureau, pretending to be walking in the same direction as them. This street ran alongside the Qinhua River, with houses located at the riverfront on both sides. The balconies of the houses were all illuminated by red candles, and at a glance, the shiny pearl curtains on the balconies were extending as far as the eyes could see. The sounds of flutes and drums from the pleasure boats echoed as they traveled to and fro along the waterways. The weather was already getting warmer at this time of the year, so the women and young girls, fresh out of the bath, all sat together outside the pavilion. As the river breeze rose, the air was suddenly pervaded with the fragrance of jasmine. Amidst this captivating and enchanting scene, Xia Yulu was led by a merchant carrying a lantern, walking and stealing glances in Liao Jixiang's direction. Liao Jixiang pushed open the sedan chair's window and looked back at Xia Yulu. As the sedan chair swayed ever so lightly, so were their hearts, trembling in untold emotions. The jolly laughter of the young girls came jingling from the riverbank. If they listened closely, they could also hear the faint sounds from the girls cracking melon seeds. The girls should also be holding their round fans at the moment, their hair loosely tied or elegantly decorated, engaging in playful banter. What a scene that could make men weak in the knees. Xia Yulu could also feel his bones turning weak, although not due to the women but because of this early summer night, along with some indescribable, ambiguous feelings. He continued down the road in a daze, approaching the door of the next shop. It was a paper clothing store. The store probably closed early, so the owner had already gone to sleep. To send off Xia Yulu, the owner had now gotten up again with his robe loosely wrapped around the shoulders, lighting a lantern as he struggled to stay awake. A considerable amount of time had passed, yet the lantern remained unlit. Xia Yulu was anxious, too anxious about losing traces of Liao Jixiang's sedan chair. The way he scratched his head and cheeks in apprehension was truly comical. Halt, Liao Jixiang instructed from his side of the road. He was afraid as well, afraid that Xia Yulu couldn't keep up with him. The sedan chair immediately came to a stop. No one knew why their dugong halted, nor did they know who he was waiting for. Yet regardless of the reasonings, who wouldn't want to linger a little longer on this quiet and tender night? Zhang Chai circled around the sedan chair and through a small opening in the sedan chair's window, he caught sight of Liao Jixiang's eyes. They were so gentle, like the embrace of water. Dugong, the question came unexpectedly out of his mouth, what are you looking at? Perhaps the night was too gorgeous, or perhaps, Liao Jixiang was too exhausted to wear the mask of the cold and superior De Dang that he finally whispered, "The man across the street. What's so good looking about him?" Zhang Chai murmured. "You shouldn't look at him." "Why?" Slight indolence and amusement were found in Liao Jixiang's voice. "He has died once. Yama refused to take him in, so he doesn't deserve to die now." Liao Jixiang was stunned for a moment, but he soon realized that this lad had misunderstood him. With a light chuckle, he said, as if he was a big brother teasing his baby brother, "Do I look like I want to kill him again?" "Why else would you look at him then?" Zhang Chai lowered his head. He stuttered as he spoke in hesitation. "Du Gong, shouldn't we do more good deeds? Weren't you always teaching us to worship Buddha and be kind? To kill him again?" Liao Jixiang frowned. His mood at the moment felt similar to back then, an intense urge of wanting to do something to him. Or, he boldly speculated, does he actually want to do something with him? Before he could delve deeper into his thoughts, the lantern from the paper clothing store was lit. The lantern was plain white, without a single character written on it. Xia Yule went on his way, so Liao Jixiang immediately stomped his foot, ordering his men, "Move." After the two of them went their separate ways, Xia Yule couldn't suppress his feelings and wrote a letter for the stone lamp on that very night. Although they were supposed to meet once every 3 days at Xiaolao Fountain, his restless soul couldn't possibly endure the waiting anymore. As usual, the letter mostly contained trivial matters, but somehow, there were hints of lingering and repressed emotions in between the lines, such as, "I prayed my finished painting grant me everlasting peace like the spirit of bamboo, yet the Lord of Wind and the Commander of Rain attacked and tempted my troubled soul. Though my emotions are tumultuous as storms, would you care to bring me order?" Words such as tumultuous and order could easily startle anyone reading it. Yet such unconventional words still won Xia Yule a reply from Liao Jixiang, which were written finely in pine soot ink. "Being carefree in the scorching summer months, I shall luxuriate in wine and chess. The unannounced advent of wind and rain knocked on my door, and left me the clusters of disturbed fresh green." Xia Yule was at a loss, and so was Liao Jixiang. Between the two of them, who was truly the one that disturbed the other? They could no longer tell. Under the full moon, Xia Yule stood beside Lingfu Temple, next to the white stone lamp and holding the piece of paper perfumed with sandalwood scent. His heart was racing. As he lost track of time standing there, he suddenly recalled his meeting with Chu Feng at midnight, so he tucked the letter roughly in his pocket and rushed towards the cavalry's warehouse, south of the city. Chu Feng was already waiting for him at the cavalry's warehouse, which was 300 steps south of Z1. Tonight, Yang Society's opera show would take place over there. After meeting each other, the two of them walked towards Z1 as they talked. When they reached Xian Bridge, they noticed a group of men led by Tu Yao, standing near the bridge under the willow branches. Tu Yao was not wearing his brocade robes tonight. Instead, he was clad in a set of armor with floral carvings. They were surrounding a lone eunuch in the middle. The slim and elegant figure belonged to none other than Jin Tang. "Make way." Jin Tang stood alone but remained dignified. Perhaps because he was not in his official attire, Tu Yao casually sat on the railing of the bridge and turned a blind eye to his men teasing Jin Tang, like how they would tease a cat. To them, Jin Tang was indeed a cat standing on 2 legs, just a slightly more noble cat. Mil Arch 2, Jin Tang was well aware that one should avoid getting into troubles with annoying imps. His words were directed to Tu Yao, "Yang Society's play is about to start, yet here you are biting me." Biting wasn't a direct insult, but the meaning was clear. Tu Yao chuckled, "The Yang Society needs to be fixed, and so is your weaving and sewing bureau." "Then why are you fixing me?" Jin Tang joined in the laugh. "What am I? You should go pester our dugong." He raises his pretty eyebrows in a provocative manner. "What? Are you afraid?" Tu Yao was known to be arrogant and conceited, so his expression changed instantly upon hearing these words. He jumped off the bridge railing, saying, "Don't assume that this Tuyao will show mercy to you." Zheng Xian and Liao Jixiang's relationship had not been the most amicable, but it certainly shouldn't have been as bad. The situation now was entirely due to the constant skirmishes between their subordinates. Xia Yulu thought to himself, that he needed to intervene. Since Liao Jixiang's men are in trouble, he couldn't just stand by and do nothing. Just as he was about to speak up, Chu Feng unexpectedly stepped forward and shouted, "What are you doing?" Chu Feng had always been the one to protect his reputation wisely. Xia Yulo stared at Chu Feng's back in astonishment, watching him as he confronted Tu Yao. "Oh, young Master Chu." Tu Yao addressed him as young master as sarcasm to mock his negligibly low rank. Xia Yulo followed Chu Feng to the scene. When he approached, he noticed that Jin Tang appeared somewhat different today. It looked like he had been drinking. His face was not as pale as usual. Under the lantern light, the pink blush on his face brought out his gorgeousness. As there was no scent of alcohol on him, he was probably applying rouge on his cheeks and earlobes. He immediately thought of Liao Jixiang, of how much prettier he could have been if he had a touch of color like that. "Aren't you scholars the most noble?" Tu Yao eyed Chu Feng and mocked, "Why are you speaking up for a eunuch?" "That's true." Xia Yulu also turned towards Chu Feng, who remained composed and put on the mask of a young nobleman. His reply was simple, without a trace of reproach, "He is a eunuch." "And isn't your master a eunuch, too?" How should Jin Tang's expression at that moment be described? It was full of disbelief. He seemed completely astonished from being pampered. Having been ridiculed and insulted way too many times in public and private, no one had ever spoken up for him. Today, Chu Feng did. Even if it was just a few words, Jin Tang was content. Tu Yao raised his hand abruptly, ready to gesture to his men in order to arrest. Yet in the corner of his eye, he caught a glimpse of Xia Yulo, the admirable figure in his master, Du Gongzheng's eyes. After pondering for a brief moment, he told his men to back off and form a line to march northeast along Xian Bridge. As he brushed past Xia Yulo, Tu Yao left him with a few words, "Yang society's play isn't that captivating. If you want to watch some good play, you know who to look for." Then, he was gone. Xia Yulo thought Chu Feng would say something to Jin Tang, but eventually he didn't. Chu Feng didn't even spare a glance at him. Instead, he nudged Xia Yulo with his elbow and said in a hurry, "Let's go." After walking for a considerable distance, Xia Yulo looked back. Jin Tang was still there, standing alone on the bridge and motionless, like a silent and awkward stone statue. To say he was made of stone, however, seemed too inaccurate, as he still possessed a faint sense of vitality, which made him appear quite pitiful. "Hey, did he apply rouge?" Xia Yulo suddenly asked. Chu Feng's heart skipped a beat. He replied vaguely, "Ah, maybe." Xia Yulo asked foolishly again, "What kind of rouge? Where can I buy it?" "Why?" Perhaps out of embarrassment or perhaps out of guilt, Chu Feng's voice sounded disturbed. "You won't look good with it? It would be a waste of money." "No, I don't." For a moment, Xia Yulo was stuttering. He cleared his throat and his mind and then said again, "I'm buying it as a gift." Chu Feng turned to look at him. "It's made from the purple osmanthus blossoms grown in the south and being sold in the rouge shop at the corner of Oil Mill Lane." He then added, "Oh, and they come in small clamshell containers. They're 25 taels of silver each." The price was just appalling. Even after entering Ziwan and settling down among the members of the Yang Society, Xia Yulo was still stunned by the number. Amidst the deafening musical instruments surrounding him and between the singing of infatuated men and sorrowful women by pretentious young opera singers on stage, Xia Yulo could see several high-ranking officials sitting together, smoking something called tobacco leaves. It was said to be extremely expensive, that was imported from Guangzhou. Many of them belonged to the Ministry of War. Xiao Lu spotted Deputy Minister Ye at one glance, who was holding a young female opera singer with heavy cosmetics in his arms, drinking and gambling with a group of officials from the Ministry of Revenue. This is the so-called untarnished stream. Xiao Lu complained to Chu Feng, just look at how they indulge themselves. Are they any different from the eunuchs? They're all the same. Chu Feng greeted a few acquaintances, sat down and poured himself a cup of tea. Yang society, the eunuchs faction, they all eat from the same bowl. So, who is more noble than whom? He seemed to be long accustomed to the obscene atmosphere and wasn't bothered by it. That's just how it is in Nanjing. Chu Feng stretched his body at ease, playing with a pair of walnuts in his left hand. What matters is that you're present. Once you're here, you're not considered to be on the eunuch's side. This is a competition that forces people to take sides, and a clash of different factions. Xiao Lu understood it now. Yang society was not opposing the eunuchs. Rather, they were opposing the officials who were not part of their circle. As for the eunuchs, that was just a flag they raised as an excuse to establish a new faction. Liao Jixiang, it can't be. The moment he heard this name, Xiao Lu's scalp immediately tightened. He straightened his body slightly and overheard the people behind him whispering, "You know how his leg got broken?" His leg was brutally broken by the common folks in Gansu. Following those words were the delighted laughter of the crowd, yet Xiao Lu's hand was clenched tightly on his knee. That group of people were exuberant, talking like one's irritating, gossiping relatives. He couldn't even manage his job in Gansu, so how did he climb up to Nanjing? It's of course. Someone is backing him. The yi and ya of the opera lyrics made it difficult for Xiao Lu to make out their words. He leaned back further and accidentally overheard another sentence, when he was in the palace, he slept on the Lao Zuzong's bed every night. That was a sensational, unprecedented scandal, so the discussion suddenly intensified. It can't be true. How can a eunuch, at this crucial point, the voices suddenly died down, who told you this? I heard it from Guo Xiaozhou, who heard it from Zheng Xian. How can it possibly be fake? Zheng Xian and Liao Jixiang had served in the palace together. If the source was him, it undoubtedly confirmed this scandalous affair. You know, that delicate face the size of a palm, surely seduces men to take care. A wave of vulgar laughter followed. Xiao Lu turned around and saw three men in their 40s or 50s, stroking their beards and winking lustfully at each other. A pity that he's too old. As if the most hidden, most tender piece of his heart was forcibly exposed in the open and ruthlessly trampled upon, Xiao Lu fought hard to endure the spasms of agony in his chest and closed his burning eyes. They remained there for an entire night, just to prove that they were not on the eunuch's side. When the members parted ways in the early morning, Chu Feng offered to buy Xiao Lu breakfast, which he refused. Following Chu Feng's description, he went to the rouge shop at the corner of Oil Mill Lane. Perhaps because the summer was near, the price of the purple Osman thus had increased to 26 taels of silver per piece. Xiao Lu gathered small pieces of silver here and there, and finally managed to make the purchase. With the rouge and the letter with the word tumultuous in his pocket, he allowed himself to aimlessly wander the city. As he wandered around, he found himself getting to Xianzhen Lane, where Liao Jixiang's private residence was located. Liao Jixiang's residence was directly opposite the largest Beiju distillery in the city. He tiptoed and tried to peer into the high walls, but of course, he couldn't see anything. When Liao Jixiang was a teenager, did he really spend every night in the Lao Zuzong's bed? Like a madman, he couldn't control himself from fantasizing that scene, but he couldn't come up with any details either. Regarding the matters in between the sheets, he had always believed Liao Jixiang to be as naive as a child. Whenever Xiao Lu thought of him smiling lightly with the red fruit in his mouth, or of him shivering in the drizzle, deprived of his dignity, he couldn't bear to imagine the same Liao Jixiang had once surrendered himself in the arms of an old man. The mere thought of it made his heart and lungs to feel pain and shatter. Who's sneaking around outside? Ruan Dian happened to come out of the mansion and saw Xia Yulu, who appeared to have lost his soul. He was immediately triggered, so he rolled up his sleeves, grabbed Xia Yulu with his hands and started to beat him. Coincidentally, Jin Tang was also leaving the mansion. Seeing Ruan Dian hitting someone, he frowned and walked around them. He had no interest in such businesses. Yet within a few steps, Ruan Dian pulled Xia Yulu's front collar open. A short letter and a clamshell dropped to the ground, tumbling and stopping at Jin Tang's feet. It only took Jin Tang a quick glance at the paper before he froze. He then hurriedly turned around and shouted, "Ruan Dian, stop!" End chapter. Da-dang. Chapter 19. The days were getting hotter. Liao Jixiang wore a thin muslin robe as he sat with Xia Yulu on the sandy ground under the shade of a tree. Between them was a wiki board drawn in the sand by small branches, with a few pebbles serving as wiki pieces. They were playing with each other. /Note, Wiki is an abstract strategy board game for two players in which the aim is to fence off more territory than the opponent using white and black pieces. The game was invented in China more than 2,500 years ago and is believed to be the oldest board game continuously played to the present day. All the while, Xia Yulu kept stealing glances at him, his gaze lingering and distressed. How could Liao Jixiang not notice it? Yet he endured, gently flicking the pebbles with his fingertips. "Your leg," Xia Yulu finally spoke up. Not daring to look at Liao Jixiang's face, Xia Yulu could only stare at his chest. Perhaps because of how thin and fine the fabric was, the sunlight came filtered through the leaves above and shined through the Liao Jixiang's robe, revealing a patch of fair, pink skin underneath. Liao Jixiang didn't respond, waiting for him to finish what he wanted to say. "Leg," Xia Yulu stuttered. "How did it break?" Liao Jixiang gave him a quick glance. "It's not broken. Just an injured knee." He tugged at the hem of his robe to cover his disabled left leg. "Who told you it was broken?" Xia Yulu didn't answer and instead asked again, "Then how did it get injured?" Liao Jixiang lowered his eyes. He didn't seem unhappy about being asked this. Rather, he looked like he was unwilling to talk. Xia Yulu swallowed hard. It appeared that what those people said was true. He could feel his heart slowly sinking, deeper and deeper. Silence reigned. A moment later, a wind rose to rustle the treetops, bringing forth a chorus of birdsong. Xia Yulu fixed his gaze at Liao Jixiang's hand which was playing wiki. It was such a slender and beautiful hand, and it must have been held countless times by the Lao Zuzong. Back in the palace, Xia Yulu didn't know how to phrase the question, with the Lao Zuzong. Liao Jixiang seemed to understand none of his words, as he looked back at Xia Yulu in confusion. Finally, Xia Yulu decided to get done with his question once and for all. "Did you sleep in the same bed at night?" Almost instantly, Liao Jixiang's face became twisted. He was somewhat stunned. But within a blink of an eye, Liao Jixiang understood where the question came from. His expression changed several times in that moment, starting with astonishment, then anger, and finally it settled into a calmness, as still as a pool of undisturbed water. The moment Xia Yulu saw Liao Jixiang's reaction, he came to the realization that he had mistaken everything, that what those people gossiped wasn't true. Apprehensively, he rushed for an apology, but Liao Jixiang expressionlessly withdrew his hand that was playing with the pebbles and replied, "I may be incomplete but I'm not tainted." Incomplete. He wasn't referring to his leg, but rather his lower parts. How Xia Yulu wished he could slap himself violently on the face. In an immediate attempt to make amends, he reached out to Liao Jixiang's hand, whose owner responded with all his strength to avoid his touch. Xia Yulu was so desperately anxious, that he propped his body upwards on his knees, almost as if he was kneeling in front of Liao Jixiang. "I misspoke. I'm stupid. I deserve to die. Those people, the way they discussed it made it sound true, so I stay away from me. Liao Jixiang's leg had an injury, and his hands were tightly locked in Xiao Lu's grip, forbidding him to stand up, so all he could do was to let out his anger. It was Zhang Xian. Xiao Lu pleaded subserviently. I only believed it because it was him. Liao Jixiang grew even more furious upon hearing that name. So, you believe him and not me? Xiao Lu was taken aback. No, no, he became increasingly unnerved, feeling that nothing he said could ever be right. Didn't you two serve in the palace together? He is nothing. Liao Jixiang raised his voice. He is the one relying on. The rest of the sentence could easily be guessed by anyone, so he didn't say it out loud. Xiao Lu understood Liao Jixiang now, that he didn't care to put those words through his lips as just mentioning them would make him feel dirty. Liao Jixiang's silence emboldened Xiao Lu, so he hesitantly reached for Liao Jixiang's shoulder. Still enraged, Liao Jixiang shoved him away and he happened to push Xiao Lu right on his left ribs. Ouch! Xiao Lu gasped in pain. It was where Ruan Dian beat him yesterday. What's wrong? Liao Jixiang realized that something was off. Nothing. Xiao Lu tried to conceal it. That's not nothing. Liao Jixiang stopped avoiding Xiao Lu. Instead, he leaned closer, like a cat climbing onto his lap, exuding a peculiar reclusive tenderness. Suddenly, his fingertips landed softly on the jut at Xiao Lu's throat. That warm sensation was so overwhelming that Xiao Lu couldn't even bear to take a breath. Gradually, Xiao Lu's collar was pulled wide open. Liao Jixiang was just like a gentle lover, evoking an impulse in Xiao Lu, which he shouldn't have possessed. There was a large patch of bruise under his ribs. Liao Jixiang's expression looked like he was about to commit murder. Who did this? No one. Xiao Lu's gaze darted uneasily. Yet Liao Jixiang could see through his thoughts. Is it my subordinates? Xiao Lu struggled to remain silent, but how could he resist when he was under this domineering man? A single displeased look from Liao Jixiang was enough to make him confess, it was Ruan Dian. Thankfully, we ran into Jin Tang, who intervened and let me go. Didn't you say you were with me? Liao Jixiang chuckled, as if Ruan Dian had done him a favor by punishing Xiao Lu. All the previous unhappiness dissipated, like a cloudless sunny sky fresh after the rain. What Liao Jixiang said was intended as a joke, yet Xiao Lu remained tense. The word with made his imagination run wild, and he stammered in shame and embarrassment, and no. How could I? I remember what you said, that I can't tell people. After his laughter subsided, Liao Jixiang fell silent again. Zhang Xian, his voice was soft, like he was whispering sweet nothings. Don't you get too close to him. Xiao Lu's eyes followed him from up close, as if he was observing a cloud or a drop of dew or perhaps, an elusive dream. He liked it when Liao Jixiang uttered things like that, as if Liao Jixiang was jealous, as if he had a feeling of sourness and displeasure in his heart. Have no worries. Liao Jixiang stroked the long hair hanging beside his own cheek. If you want to return to Beijing, I can make arrangements, too. Xiao Lu was stunned. The thought of returning to Beijing had never crossed his mind, and he had certainly never considered going back by exploiting Liao Jixiang or Zhang Xian's connections. At this very moment, he didn't even want to go back at all. Yet he was too ashamed to admit it. You just need to wait a little longer. Liao Jixiang lowered his head. Wait until Lao Zuzong is not as busy, which didn't sound true at all, as it felt ever so careless and insincere. He continued, wait until I figure out how to do. He didn't say it out loud, that he wanted Xiao Lu's company for just a little longer, but Xiao Lu understood him too well. Suppose I'm gone, what will you do? He asked. Liao Jixiang lifted his head, his sudden movement betraying a hint of panic. What do you mean by what will I do? He dared not make eye contact with Xiao Lu, and continued, I've come this far over all these years. Do I look like I lack company to you? Definitely. Xiao Lu thought to himself, you'll definitely lack my company. Then I won't go back, he asserted. Liao Jixiang seemed to shiver for a second, which was barely noticeable. Beijing is still a better choice for you. Your family is in Beijing, your future is in Beijing, and your heart is also in Bei. My heart is here. Xiao Lu interrupted, staring at him with extreme intensity. So much so that Liao Jixiang was beginning to feel uncomfortable, so he tried to start another subject. Let's not talk about that for now. Regarding what happened at Yang Society that day. Suddenly, Xiao Lu grabbed his hand again. This time, his movement was so particularly flustered and forceful, that Liao Jixiang was beginning to feel pain. Xiao Lu must have had his head above the clouds, as he was returning to the same old question. Lao Zuzong. Did he really never touch you? Liao Jixiang was about to get angry, yet Xiao Lu held his hands so devoutly and pleaded like a sincere worshipper. Don't get angry. I beg you, he pulled at him almost aggressively, as if trying to force something out of him. Did he ever hold you like this, or touch you on your? Only you do this. Liao Jixiang withdrew his hand feeling uneasy, and he reproached, and it feels strange. So, he found it strange, too. Xiao Lu dared not make any further movements, and behaved like a young pupil who had just been slapped on his palm, his head hanging low. He heard Liao Jixiang's displeased words. Don't you assume that just because I've had a cut down there, I don't understand anything. Silence ensued. A dreadfully long and awkward silence. Xiao Lu boiled in his torment of anxiety until Liao Jixiang tugged on his sleeve and said, help me up. Let's go back. On that night, Xiao Lu had a dream. An erotic dream. It was hot everywhere. And there was a warm body in his arms. He saw a back under him, white as snowflakes with lustrous long black hair soaked in sweat, sticky on that back. The hair itched Xiao Lu's chest and became entangled in his mouth. He spat it out and moved his waist to thrust harder in. This is a dream about Beijing. He thought, his home and his wife whom he was apart with for a while. Surely this is a dream, and that's why he was plunging in so presumptuously. When he was awake, he was never such a lascivious man. Does it hurt? He asked. Ever since he was a teenager, he was the one with the larger hardness among his peers. He was always careful with her. Never dared to be so callous. There was no response from between his arms. So, he sank his lower parts in there as deep as he could, so deep that he moaned from the almost unbearable pleasure. His hand felt for her from the pelvis and went up. She was skinnier, her ribs were almost fleshless. Her waist was so tiny and her ribs so narrow. Then he felt for her breast and abruptly paused. That region was flat, with only a pair of pointed nipples. As if trying to confirm, his hand lingered there, squeezing and rubbing, again and again. And then he went hurriedly upwards, to touch the cheek. The cheek was wet through and through, full of tears. He clasped that jaw in his hand and forced that face around. Thin double eyelids and a bodhisattva-like lips that was being bitten tightly. It was Liao Jixiang. Unable to tell whether he felt fear or ecstasy, he let out a sudden cry. His spirit almost departed from his body. Xiao Lu sat up from the bed all of a sudden, his eyes wide opened, staring blankly at the solid darkness in front of him in the middle of the night. His quilt was drenched in heavy sweat, so he threw it off his body. In between his thighs was something steaming warm, sticking wetly to his skin. End chapter. Da-dang. Chapter 20. The sedan chair landed and tilted forward. The servant waiting outside lifted the sedan chair's curtain, and Chu Feng got off the chair after dusting his robe. Why are you in such a rush? What's the matter? Chu Feng asked his father's servant waiting at the gate. The servant was young but experienced. "We have a distinguished guest," he replied succinctly. Chu Feng cast a sideways glance at the servant, shook his sleeve and walked inside. He bypassed the Yingbai, crossed the courtyard and directly entered the hall. His father was standing with his back hunched in front of the main seat, like an obedient servant. Chu Feng slowed down and at a glance, recognized that the person his father was entertaining was Zhang Xian. As always, Zhang Xian had a lavish appearance. He was dressed in a hand-drawn silk robe in the color of fresh pine tree cones, wearing a smile on his face, and attentively listening to Minister Chu's cliched chatter, which was all about displaying his loyalty. Tu Yao was beside Zhang Xian, dressed in a brocade robe woven with silver threads and carrying a sword, standing upright. Chu Feng's face was completely frozen. The appalled expression on his face was vivid. He couldn't believe that Zhang Xian was actually in his home, the distinguished guest of his father. He wanted to leave but he didn't dare to turn around just like that. When Zhang Xian noticed Chu Feng, he straightened his back in arrogance, posing an air of superiority. So Minister Chu quickly gestured to him, "Feng heir, come over and meet the Fuzidaran." Note: Fuzidaran can be translated literally to the Honorable Lord Father and Ancestor, which denotes that one was subordinating himself to the one he addressed as Fuzidaran. Every hair on Chu Feng's body was standing up. Fuzidaran. He glanced at his father quizzically but Minister Chu ignored him. Instead, he turned to Zhang Xian to explain, "Fuzidaran, this junior is ignorant. Pray forgive him." "Father." Chu Feng had heard about the ridiculous rumors of high-ranked officials in Beijing recognizing the powerful eunuchs as their lord fathers, but such an embarrassing, scandalous situation was the last thing he had ever imagined to happen in his own home. "Feng heir." Minister Chu's tone became stern. "Come and show your respects." Chu Feng stood still in shock, motionless. Zhang Xian curled his lips slightly, "Looks like the young master is unwilling." He pretended to get up but was immediately stopped by Minister Chu, who pleaded urgently, "Fuzidaran, please be calm." He then unleashed his temperaments towards Chu Feng. Apprehensively, his eyes widened in rage, his two frail legs trembling unsteadily. "You little beast," he softly growled, "you're trying to kill your father." It took Chu Feng a significant amount of effort to lift his eyes and look at him. "You're accepting your enemy as your father. If I don't accept, what else can I do?" From a close distance, Minister Chu was clearly sweating profusely, obviously feeling helpless, too. "If I don't accept, he won't let me join their side." Chu Feng remained obstinate and unconvinced. He stood sideways and listened to his father's reprimand. "Because of that friend of yours Xia Yulo, Liao Jixiang is no longer accepting my visiting cards. We can't afford to lose this opportunity with Zhang Xian again." Chu Feng turned his head away with disgust. "Why must you join the eunuchs? Don't you see how powerful Yang society has become?" Minister Chu questioned, his wrinkled face showing a distorted ferocity. "If one doesn't join Yang society, one will be considered a member of the eunuch faction. If they have to identify me as a member of the eunuch faction, then I might as well truly become one of them. This is madness." Chu Feng thought to himself. Yang society has driven the officialdom of Nanjing City into insanity. Yang society does not belong to the Ministry of War. Chu Feng suddenly barked and even Zhang Xian heard it. Minister Chu was astonished. He stared at Chu Feng apprehensively for quite a while before finally saying, "We've been on bad terms with the Ministry of War for years. And now that they're in power, we'll surely suffer tremendous losses, even if we didn't die." Father got it right. Chu Feng wasn't so ignorant that he didn't know the rules of the game. He hesitated for a moment, inclined to walk towards Zhang Xian. At that moment, Tu Yao interjected, "Du Gong, according to custom, tea should be offered when adopting a new relative." He ordered his subordinates, "Come, bring us a kneeling pad." He was implying that Minister Chu should kneel. As an elderly in his 50s, he was naturally reluctant to kneel in front of a younger man. With an ingratiating face, he declined, "Fuzidaran, this son has suffered from his ailing legs for years. 'Tis true that these knees really cannot bear to bend down." Zhang Xian nodded and turned to Tu Yao, "That's true, this one has never seen him walk properly." Yet Tu Yao smiled like he sensed a breeze in spring gently caressing his face, which was exactly like how Chu Feng had smiled at him on that day at Xian Bridge. "If the son can't kneel, don't we still have a grandson?" Chu Feng felt as if he had been slapped in the face. His eyes immediately turned bloodshot. Without any hesitation, he turned and walked away. Tu Yao was expecting this exact moment where Chu Feng flicked his sleeves and left. Seeing that, he immediately shouted, "How dare you defy me? Take him down." A group of 7 or 8 men dashed forward from below the dais. Without drawing their knives, they caught Chu Feng by the arms, pinned him to the ground, and tied him up with ropes right away. Minister Chu was so frightened that he dared not make a sound, whereas Zhang Xian frowned with annoyance. What a disappointment! Zhang Xian dusted his cuff and stood up. Minister Chu didn't dare to stop him, so he could only grab Zhang Xian's entourage, Tu Yao, and ask, where are you taking him?" Tu Yao pulled his hand away. "To the West Yamen." The West Yamen was located in the shadow of Mount Zhong. As Nanjing didn't have an imperial prison, Tu Yao always liked to borrow the prison of the Ministry of Justice. Like a live pig, Chu Feng was bound by ropes, carried into the prison and directly tossed into a dark chamber for torture. Tu Yao took care of Chu Feng personally. In fact, it shouldn't be considered personally at all, as all he did was smile, leaving the instructions to wash his feet, before shaking his little riding crop and leaving. The so-called wash feet referred to the torture of soaking the feet alternately in ice water and boiling water. Chu Feng was tied down to a large, black wooden beam, with heavy chains all over him. He was wearing a fine robe today, but those thugs didn't care. They tore it apart, and removed all the valuable items worn on his head and hands, claiming them for themselves. It was not necessary to mention 2 or 3 rounds, as Chu Feng simply couldn't bear even the first round. The moment his feet entered the ice water, he screamed and screamed, asking the thug to call Tu Yao back. He had never experienced anything like this before. Growing up as a young master, he had never even suffered through a slightly stronger gust of wind. "I have money. My family has been officials for 3 generations. I can pay as much as you want," he shouted at the thugs. "I give up. Go and tell Tu Yao that I gave up." The thug, who was boiling water, giggled and replied, I know. I can tell you have the money. Those without money aren't even allowed in this room." He stoked the fire to make it burn even brighter, and bubbles were seen to rise and burst on the surface of the water. "Just you wait. Boiling water is on the way." Chu Feng was so terrified that tears were streaming down his face. His feet were so freezing cold that he couldn't feel the pain anymore, as if they were broken. He pleaded desperately, perspiration pouring down his forehead. "Please, find Tu Yao for me. I'll give him money, I'll kneel. Anything. I can do anything." "Young master," the thug looked at him with concern, "you have to go through 1 round at the very least. If everyone's dignity was so fragile, then my job would be too easy." As he spoke, he removed the ice water and brought forth the basin of boiling water. Chu Feng let out a scream from the depths of his throat, writhing and turning futilely on the large wooden beam, shouting repeatedly, "I'll give you money. I'll give you money." The thug looked at him with contempt, grabbed his feet and pressed them hard into the boiling water. Then came a sizzling sound of skin parting from the flesh. Plenty of steam rose from the basin. The thug fanned the steam as he mocked, "You people see money as such a big deal, but our mill arch too is famous for taking money as nothing. Not just money, even the opera singers and women don't catch his eyes." Chu Feng convulsed violently. After the convulsions, he collapsed abruptly like a slow-wit paralytic, splashing his urine which he was not able to control. The thug looked at him and laughed, revealing a wide gap between his two front teeth. Our commander too likes to climb high and see far. Can your family arrange that? Upon finishing the sentence, he stood up, went to the ice chest to fetch more ice again. When Chu Feng heard the noise of ice cubes hitting the bottom of the basin, he truly couldn't endure any longer. Trembling, he burst into loud sobs. After going through several rounds of washing, the thug ordered his men to untie Chu Feng from the wooden beam and securely bound him to a torture bed. Someone brought in 2 sacks of rice. The sacks were not large, each weighing about 7 to 8 caddies, which were stacked on top of Chu Feng's chest. This was called the pressing weight of the salary, which came in the form of heavy press and light press. For most people, undergoing light press for a day and a night was enough to take their last breath away. Chu Feng didn't have much knowledge about these things. He was even relieved when he first lay down. For a grown man, he thought 20 caddies of rice was nothing, which was indeed the case at the beginning. Yet the longer it pressed on, the harder it became to breathe. Time itself seemed to have acquired power. It transformed into a soft, blunt knife, gradually cutting away his vitality. The feeling was even worse than washing his feet. In less than 2 shishin of pressing, Chu Feng wailed and sobbed, Excuse me." The thug, busy with some killing tools that Chu Feng couldn't even name, replied without raising his head, "Speak. Help me deliver a message. I'll pay you." "I can't do that." The thug spoke in truth, his hands still occupied at work. "The Lord Commander forbids us to pay private visits to government officials' homes." Chu Feng fell silent. After he said again, 100 taels of silver for a trip to the weaving and sewing bureau. The thug put away what he was doing and stood up. "For a eunuch." Chu Feng nodded. "I want to write a letter." The thug wiped his hands, found a piece of paper and a pen, and watched Chu Feng as he wrote down a few trembling characters. He asked, "To whom?" Chu Feng struggled to breathe with his chest being compressed. "Jin Tang." The thug said nothing in return. He folded the letter and turned away. He left the torture room, went through the side passage and entered the rear hall, where Tu Yao was sitting on the dais, drinking with several low-ranked officials from the Ministry of Justice. The thug unfolded the letter and showed it to him. Tu Yao took a quick glance at it and nodded. ******. Mei Azza and a few of his subordinates had been playing Meidiao all night long without getting a good hand. As dawn was breaking, he finally had a card featuring Little Li Guang Huarong, but just before he played it, Jin Tang hastily pushed the door open and entered. /Note: Meidiao, also known as Yazashi, is somewhat similar to poker, where there are 40 cards of 4 suits. Each card was illustrated with one of the 108 stars of destiny from the classic Chinese novel Water Margin attributed to Shi Nian. Chief, Jin Tang cut straight to the point. "I have something I need your help with." Jin Tang rarely acted this way. Like Liao Jixiang, he had that pride of a scholar deep in his bones. Mei Azza dismissed his men, leaned further into his luhan bed to make room for Jin Tang. "What's the matter?" Jin Tang didn't sit. Instead, he fished out a crumpled piece of paper from his sleeve and handed it to Mei Azza. There were 3 words written on it: "Chun Chu save me." This particular type of paper. Mei Azza took the paper in his hands and examined it from both sides. "West Yamen?" he asked as he leaned comfortably on the cushion, clearly not taking the matter seriously. "Who was arrested?" Jin Tang lowered his eyes. "Chu Feng of the Ministry of War." Mei Azza straightened up, his back moving slightly away from the cushion. "Is there something between you and him?" Jin Tang turned his face away, as if he was afraid of Mei Azza's gaze. "Just a nodding acquaintance." Mei Azza leaned back again. "A nodding acquaintance, and he gave you this letter?" He casually toyed the crumpled piece of paper in his hand and smiled at ease. Well, it doesn't seem right if I insist you two aren't nodding acquaintances, since he's not really asking for your help. He was referring to the name Chunchu on the paper. Jintang slowly leaned in and sat on the edge of the bed. Xiaoyulo, courtesy name Chunchu. Oh. Mei Azha didn't care at all. Such insignificant characters were unworthy of his attention. Just do whatever needs to be done. Do you want to sort things out for this Chunchu and get a favor from Chu Feng? Jintang remained silent, looking solemn. Don't be a fool. Mei Azha tossed the crumpled paper at him. He won't think highly of us. Even if you save him 18 times, he still won't hold you in high regard. This Xiaoyulo, Jintang suddenly spoke up. He knows Du Gong. All of a sudden, Mei Azha sat up from the bed, glaring at him intently. They should be very close. Very close. Mei Azha narrowed his eyes. How so? Well, they exchange letters every day, and meet once every few days. It's that kind of close. Jintang raised his head, his eyes darted briefly at Mei Azha. Haven't you noticed that Du Gong has been visiting Liu Manpo frequently lately? Mei Azha picked up the paper from Jintang and stared at that unfamiliar name. How long has this been going on? About a month or two. Xie Chunchu, Mei Azha was struggling to comprehend the situation. Didn't Du Gong want to kill him before? Jintang shook his head. I'm not sure. He was about to say something else, but swallowed it back. For someone who was always patient, Mei Azha was so irritated that he nudged Jintang with his elbow. Speak up. I've read their letters. Jintang appeared too embarrassed to talk about it. The recent letters, he blushed before he could finish his sentence. Oh, it's too inappropriate. What exactly was inappropriate about it? Jintang didn't say it out loud, but Mei Azha understood the implication. He kept his mouth wide open in shock or maybe anger, but didn't say anything. It was at this point that Jintang finally voiced his doubts. Suppose I pass this letter to Xiaoyulo, suppose he really goes to save Chu Feng and something happens to him. Du Gong will definitely take my life. No, 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 Mei Azha waved his hand repeatedly. He's just an insignificant 6th-rank official. What does he have to save someone from West Yamen? Besides, he narrowed his big round eyes, he's a scholar, and a top-scoring Tanhua. How could he genuinely want to befriend Du Gong? Almost instantly, Jintang frowned in alertness. Are you saying? Even if he doesn't come with bad intentions, Mei Azha grabbed Jintang's wrist and held it firmly. Did you forget what happened in Gansu? Jintang's eyes suddenly widened. Go, Mei Azha shoved him towards the door. Go, now. End chapter.